The sky bled fire, and from its wound, a man fell into the embrace of the Atazam, the hidden daughters of the earth, who knew the sun and moon but had never known his kind. His broken machine, a screaming eagle of metal, had torn a scar through the pristine canopy of their inviolable valley, a place whispered only in the lost legends of the world beyond. Kalen awoke to a world painted in green and shadow, the scent of damp earth and unknown blossoms filling his senses, a throbbing pain his only anchor to the violence of his arrival. Spears, tipped with obsidian that drank the light, ringed him. Faces, framed by hair as dark as raven wings, regarded him not with curiosity, but with a wary, ancient stillness. These were the Atazam, their expressions unreadable, their movements fluid and silent as the forest creatures they emulated. They were all women, their forms strong and lithe, clad in intricately worked hides and woven fibers. He saw no fear in their eyes, only a profound, unsettling evaluation. He was an anomaly, a creature outside their understanding, and therefore, a potential threat. One woman, younger than some, older than others, stepped forward. Her gaze, the color of rich amber, held a spark of something other than cold assessment, perhaps a nascent curiosity, or a flicker of disquiet that mirrored his own. Her name, he would later learn, was Lyra. She carried no spear, but a medicine pouch at her hip spoke of a different role. An elder, her face a beautiful map of time and wisdom, spoke in a language that was like the rustling of leaves and the flow of water, her voice low but carrying authority. Lyra listened, then turned her gaze back to Kalen, her head tilted slightly. He tried to move, a groan escaping his lips as fire lanced through his leg. The spears tightened, a collective intake of breath. Lyra raised a hand, a small, calming gesture. She spoke again, her tone softer than the elder's, and though he understood nothing, the sound was not overtly hostile. Slowly, cautiously, two women approached, their movements efficient, impersonal. They examined his injuries with a detached competence, their touch surprisingly gentle yet firm. He was lifted, the world tilting and swaying, the faces a blur. He was carried through the dense forest, the light filtering in broken shards, until they reached a village of woven huts nestled organically amongst ancient trees. It was a place of profound peace, yet for Kalen, it was the heart of his captivity. He was placed in a small, isolated hut at the edge of the settlement. His leg was bound with poultices that cooled the fire, his wounds cleaned with an astringent liquid. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, he understood he was a prisoner, yet one tended with a strange, almost ritualistic care. Lyra often came, sometimes with the elder, sometimes alone. She would bring him water in a clay vessel, food, strange fruits, roasted roots, occasionally smoked meat. She never spoke to him in those early days, not in a way he could comprehend. Her presence was a silent observation. He, in turn, watched her. He saw the strength in her shoulders, the intelligence in her amber eyes, the way she moved with an unstudied grace that spoke of a life lived in perfect harmony with this wild, secret world. He saw the community of women, their shared tasks, their laughter like wind chimes, their solemn rituals performed under the moon. There were no men. The realization settled in him slowly, a profound truth that reshaped his understanding of this place. He was utterly other. His initial fear began to transform, not into comfort, but into a deep, consuming loneliness, a mirror of the isolation he had cultivated in his own world, now amplified 1,000-fold. Yet, in Lyra's occasional, fleeting glances, he thought he saw not just the guardian, but something more, a question, perhaps, or the faintest shadow of empathy for the broken creature fate had delivered to their doorstep. He was a wound in their perfect world, and she, it seemed, was tasked with deciding if he would fester or, somehow, heal. The days bled into weeks, marked by the changing light through the single opening of his hut and the rhythm of Lyra's visits. His leg began to mend, the sharp agony dulling to a persistent ache. He started to move more, testing his strength, pacing the small confines of his dwelling. From his doorway, he watched the Atazam. He saw their resilience, their intricate knowledge of the forest. They were huntresses, gatherers, artisans, healers, their society a complex tapestry woven without the threads he had always known. There was a fierce grace to them, a self-sufficiency that was both admirable and intimidating. Lyra remained his primary point of contact. The silence between them was vast, yet it became a canvas upon which subtle communications were painted. A nod of thanks from him when she brought food. A slight inclination of her head in acknowledgement. He began to try, sketching rudimentary pictures in the dirt with a stick, his fallen machine, the mountains beyond the valley, a questioning look towards the vast, unchanging sky. She would watch, her expression thoughtful, sometimes pointing to one of his drawings and uttering a word in her fluid tongue, a word he would try to echo, his own voice rough and unfamiliar in the quiet. He learned the sun, moon, water, tree. She learned his name, Kalen, the sound of it foreign on her lips, yet she said it with a careful precision. He learned hers, Lyra, a name that felt like light. His initial pity for their isolation, or perhaps for his own shattered existence, slowly transformed into a profound respect for their strength, their harmony. And for Lyra, a growing curiosity bloomed. She was not just one of them, there was a keenness in her eyes, a depth of spirit that seemed to look beyond the surface, beyond his strangeness. One day, a small crisis unfolded. A young girl, no more than 6 summers old, had wandered too close to the riverbank where a venomous snake, disturbed from its sunning spot, coiled to strike. Kalen, hobbling near his hut, saw the imminent danger before any of the distant women did. Without a thought for his mending leg, he lurched forward, shouting a wordless cry, scooping the child away just as the snake struck the empty air. He stumbled, falling heavily, his leg screaming in protest. Several women rushed over, spears raised, fear and suspicion warring on their faces. But the child, safe in his arms, pointed to the disappearing snake, chattering excitedly. Lyra arrived, her breath coming quickly. She saw the scene, the frightened child now clinging to Kalen, the fading hiss of the serpent. Her eyes met Kalen's, and for the first time, he saw something beyond caution, a flicker of gratitude, perhaps even a nascent trust. Later that evening, she came to his hut not just with food, but with a special poultice for his re-aggravated leg. As she tended to him, her touch gentle, their proximity closer than it had ever been, the silence felt different, charged with a new understanding. He pointed to himself. Kalen, he pointed to her. Lyra, she nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. Then, she picked up his discarded stick, and in the dirt, she drew a circle, then many small figures within it, all women. She pointed to the figures, then swept her hand around the valley. Atazam, she said, her voice soft. Then, she drew a line, a barrier around the circle, and outside it, she drew crude shapes of what he recognized as men, but with fierce, aggressive lines. She looked at him, her expression somber, and tapped the figures of men, then shook her head with a profound sadness. A piece of their story, unspoken yet clear. A history of hurt, of separation. His understanding of their isolation deepened, and with it, a burgeoning protectiveness for this fragile sanctuary and the woman who was slowly, cautiously, letting him glimpse its heart. The tentative peace Kalen had begun to feel was as fragile as a butterfly's wing. His act of saving the child had softened some of the Atazam, but for others, it only deepened their unease. He was an unknown quantity, a force that had breached their ancestral defenses. Whispers began to circulate, like mist through the trees, carrying suspicion and fear. An elder woman named Maeva, her eyes like chips of flint and her spirit unyielding as the mountains that ringed their valley, became the voice of this dissent. She had seen too many winters, remembered too many old warnings passed down from mother to daughter, tales of the outside ones, that sky fallen, who brought only disruption and sorrow. Kalen, to her, was the embodiment of those ancient fears. He is not of the earth, Maeva would declare in council, her voice resonant with conviction. He fell from the sky, a bad omen. The balance is disturbed. The spirits of the ancestors are restless. Lyra, who had been granted more access to Kalen, found herself increasingly defending his presence, or at least, arguing for patience. He has shown no malice, Grandmother Maeva, she would counter, her voice respectful but firm. He saved little Nona. His ways are strange, yes, but is all that is strange inherently evil? But Maeva's words found fertile ground in the hearts of many. A lingering drought had parched their usually lush hunting grounds. A sickness had afflicted some of the younger children. These were signs, Maeva insisted, of Kalen's ill-fated influence. The atmosphere in the village grew heavier. The glances Kalen received became colder, the silence around him more profound, now tinged with hostility rather than mere caution. He felt it like a pressure on his skin, an invisible wall rising between him and the community he was slowly, tentatively, beginning to understand. Lyra's visits became more fraught. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the strain of her position. She would still bring him food, still attempt their slow, painstaking lessons in language, but a shadow lay over their interactions. He tried, through gestures and the few words he knew, to convey his helplessness in the face of their accusations, his desire only for peace. His own past, the life he had fled when he took to the skies in that ill-fated journey, began to haunt his solitary hours. He remembered the clang of machinery, the grey indifference of cityscapes, the hollowness of a life lived without true connection, a different kind of isolation, but isolation nonetheless. He had sought escape, and found himself in a purer, more elemental prison, where his very being was a source of fear. One evening, as twilight painted the valley in hues of purple and deep orange, a group of women, led by Maeva, approached Kalen's hut. Their faces were grim, their intentions unmistakable. Lyra was not among them. Maeva stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. She spoke, her words sharp and accusatory. Though Kalen understood little, the import was clear: he was judged, condemned. He saw spears held tighter, expressions hardening. He stood, his mended leg supporting him, his hands open at his sides, a silent testament to his lack of aggression. He felt a profound weariness, a despair that echoed the desolation he had carried for so long. He had crashed from one broken world into another, only to find himself, once again, the outsider, the harbinger of fear. The moment stretched, taut and brittle, under the fading light. Just as Maeva seemed poised to give a command, Lyra's voice cut through the heavy air. "Stop!" She pushed her way through the grim-faced women, placing herself between Kalen and Maeva. Her stance was defiant, her amber eyes blazing with a fire Kalen had never seen before. "He has done nothing to warrant this," Lyra declared, her voice ringing with conviction, addressing Maeva but encompassing all who watched. "You speak of omens and disturbances, grandmother, but you see only with the eyes of fear. I have watched him. He has shared our quiet, eaten our food, and offered harm to none. He saved Nona when the serpent would have taken her. Is this the act of an evil spirit?" Maeva's expression hardened. "He is a man, child. The first mothers warned us. Their world brought only pain. His presence defiles this sacred place. The drought, the sickness, these are not coincidences." "The seasons turn, grandmother," Lyra countered, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its resolve. "Droughts have come before. Sickness is a shadow that sometimes falls. To blame him is to blind ourselves to the true rhythms of the earth. Perhaps," she added, her gaze sweeping over the assembled women, "his arrival is not an omen of doom, but a test of our own compassion, our own wisdom." Kalen, understanding fragments, but mostly reading the raw emotion, felt a surge of gratitude so profound it almost buckled his knees. He looked at Lyra, seeing not just a woman, but a spirit of fierce integrity. He took a hesitant step forward, stopping beside her. He looked at Maeva, then at the others. He slowly reached into the pouch at his belt, the one Lyra had given him to carry a few essentials. He pulled out a small, intricately carved bird, something he had whittled from a piece of scrap wood during his long hours of confinement, a creature of the Atazam forest. He held it out, not to Maeva, but towards the youngest woman in the crowd, one who had always looked at him with more curiosity than fear. "For Atazam," he said, his voice raspy, using one of the few words he knew, meaning it as "for the people's," a small gesture, but in the charged atmosphere, it felt monumental. Before anyone could react further, a tremor ran through the earth, a low growl that seemed to come from the very bones of the mountains. It was slight at first, easily dismissed, but then another followed, stronger, making the ground beneath their feet shudder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. And then the sky, which had been clear, began to darken with an unnatural speed as smoke, thick and acrid, billowed over the western ridge. A cry went up from one of the sentries posted on the village periphery. "Fire!" The forest burns. The tribal dispute was instantly forgotten, replaced by a far more primal, immediate terror. The drought had left the ancient forest a tinderbox, and the unusual tremor must have dislodged rocks, sending sparks into the dry undergrowth. Panic began to spread. Women grabbed children, shouting in fear and confusion. Kaelan looked at Lyra. Her face was pale, but her eyes were already scanning the direction of the smoke, assessing the wind. He knew fire. He knew its hunger, its terrifying speed. He also knew that organized action was their only hope. "Lyra," he said, his voice urgent, grabbing her arm. He pointed towards the river. "Water. We need a break." Cut trees. He used gestures, desperate to convey the idea of a fire break. Lyra, her mind racing, understood. Her knowledge of the land, of which trees would burn slowest, which clearings offered a natural defense, combined with his desperate, practical urgency. "Yes," she said, nodding sharply. "The Whispering Creek, it is wide there. We must guide the peoples together." Their earlier conflict transformed into an unspoken alliance. They began to shout directions. Lyra's voice, clear and commanding in her own tongue, rallied the terrified women. Kaelan, using his strength, began to direct efforts to clear a path, to help the elders and the very young. The heat was growing, the roar of the approaching inferno a terrifying symphony of destruction. Their world was about to be consumed, and their only hope lay in the desperate, combined strength of the fallen Skyman and the Daughter of the Earth. The fire was a living beast, roaring and consuming the forest with an insatiable hunger. Smoke choked the air, turning day into an apocalyptic twilight. Embers rained down like malevolent stars. Kaelan worked alongside the Atazam women, his body aching, his lungs burning, but driven by a primal will to survive, to protect. He showed them how to fell smaller trees strategically, creating a desperate gap, his prior knowledge of fighting wildfires in his old life surging to the fore. Lyra was everywhere, a beacon of calm strength in the chaos. Her intimate knowledge of every path, every hidden spring, every nuance of the terrain was proving invaluable. She directed women to carry water in every available vessel, soaking the ground along the creek bed. She knew which plants, when crushed, could soothe burns, and which berries, though scarce, could provide quick energy. Her intuition seemed almost supernatural. She anticipated wind shifts, guided groups away from collapsing trees moments before they fell, her senses preternaturally attuned to the disaster unfolding around them. Kaelan watched her, his admiration growing with every passing moment. She was not just resilient, she was a force of nature herself, rooted in this land in a way he could only marvel at. Hours passed in a blur of smoke, heat, and frantic effort. The fire licked at the edges of their hastily constructed firebreak along the Whispering Creek, but the wider expanse of water and the damp earth held. They fought for every inch, men and women, or rather, the one man and many women, united against a common enemy that knew no gender, no tribe. At one point, a section of the firebreak was breached, flames leaping across the creek with a terrifying surge. Panic rippled anew. But Lyra, her face smudged with soot, her eyes reflecting the inferno, led a small, daring group, Kaelan among them, to beat back the encroaching flames with wet branches and packed earth, their efforts a desperate dance against annihilation. He saw Maeva, her earlier animosity forgotten, working tirelessly beside younger women, her flinty eyes now filled with a grim determination. The crisis had burned away old prejudices, revealing the raw, shared instinct for survival. As the main fire front finally began to recede, having consumed vast swathes of their ancestral forest but sparing the core of their village and the people huddled by the creek, an exhausted silence fell, broken only by the crackle of distant flames and the coughs of the smoke-filled. They had survived, but their world was irrevocably scarred. In the eerie orange glow of the aftermath, Kaelan found Lyra sitting by the water's edge, her shoulders slumped, gazing at the devastation. He approached slowly, sinking down beside her. The silence between them was no longer one of caution or unspoken questions, but of shared trauma, shared relief, shared exhaustion. He looked at her, at the strength that emanated from her even in her weariness, at the sorrow in her eyes for the lost forest. He reached out, his hand hesitant, and gently brushed a soot smudge from her cheek. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything they had endured. Her amber eyes met his, and in their depths, he saw not the resilient outcast or the stoic protector, but simply Lyra, the woman who had stood for him, who had fought beside him. He fumbled for words, his throat raw. The Atazam language was still largely a mystery to him, and English felt inadequate, alien. He settled for her name, spoken with a reverence that transcended language. Lyra. He then touched his chest, then gestured to her, then to the valley around them, what remained of it, and finally, he made a small, encompassing gesture that he hoped conveyed permanence. Stay, he managed, the word a rough plea. Here. With you. Lyra looked at him, truly looked at him, for a long, silent moment. The firelight flickered in her eyes. A slow smile, tired but genuine, touched her lips. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, a touch that sent a shiver through him despite the lingering heat from the fire. Then, she spoke his name, Kalen, her voice soft, and nodded, a single, definitive movement. Acceptance. A new beginning, forged in fire and ashes. Years passed, seasons turning the scarred landscape back to green with a persistent, hopeful resilience. The valley of the Atazam, though changed, endured. And within it, Kalen and Lyra built a life together, a testament to the love that had blossomed amidst chaos and misunderstanding. He never repaired his fallen machine, it became a relic, a reminder of a world left behind, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Instead, he learned the ways of the Atazam, their language flowing more easily from his tongue with each passing year. He taught them what he knew of simple engineering, helping to build stronger, safer shelters, and new systems for irrigation that made their gardens flourish even in drier times. Lyra, her wisdom and courage recognized by all, became a respected leader among her people, her counsel sought, her spirit a guiding light. Kalen stood beside her, not as an outsider, but as a partner, his strength and knowledge woven into the fabric of their community. Their shared hut was a place of peace, filled with the murmur of two languages blending into one, with shared tasks and quiet companionship. Children, their laughter echoing the wind chimes of old, played freely, some with hair as dark as Lyra's, others with eyes that held the blue of a distant sky, a beautiful merging of two worlds. The Atazam, who had once feared the unknown man, now saw Kalen as one of their own, a brother, a protector, a father. Maeva, her flintiness softened by time and the undeniable evidence of Kalen's worth, would often sit with him and Lyra, sharing stories of the ancestors, her gaze holding a grudging respect that had, over time, warmed into genuine affection. The unique gifts Lyra possessed, her profound intuition, her deep connection to the rhythms of the earth, were not diminished but enhanced, understood now not as mere tribal skill, but as a profound wisdom that Kalen, too, learned to respect and rely upon. Their love was a quiet river, deep and enduring, a sanctuary carved from the heart of isolation and disaster. It was in the shared glance across a crackling fire, the comfortable silence as they worked side by side, the gentle touch of hands in the twilight. Their life was a poem written in deeds, not words, a legend whispered on the valley winds. They had faced the fire, and from its ashes, had cultivated a garden of unparalleled beauty, a testament to the enduring power of connection, acceptance, and a love that dared to bridge the chasm between two vastly different souls. The valley thrived, a hidden jewel of understanding in a world too often fractured by fear and prejudice. And so, their story, like the river that nourished their valley, flows onward, a quiet testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love. When you look out at the world, at the faces that seem so different from your own, do you see a threat, or do you, like Lyra, dare to see a soul? When adversity strikes, do you retreat into the familiar, or do you, like Kalen, find the courage to build something new, even in the ashes of what was lost? The heart has its own language, one that speaks of courage, empathy, and the unwavering hope that even in the deepest isolation, connection can bloom. Perhaps the greatest adventures are not those that take us to distant lands, but those that lead us to truly see, and be seen by, another. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If their story touched your heart, subscribe for more tales that explore the depths of human emotion and the enduring strength of the human spirit.